Mara liked her mornings the way she liked her peace. Hot, quiet, and free of unnecessary drama. The house on OPB Street was her pride, a cream-painted fortress with a small balcony that caught the first honest light of Lagos. She bought it before Percy learned how to pronounce mortgage without sweating, and she renovated it with the kind of patience that makes tiles align and doors stop squeaking. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition. The curtains hung like good manners, and the framed art on the wall looked expensive enough to judge you silently. Percy lived there like a man who thought marriage was a receipt that automatically transferred ownership. He'd stroll through the hallway with his phone in hand, nodding at the ceiling as if he personally installed the sky. "Our home," he would say, with an emphasis on "our" that somehow meant mine. Mara used to laugh at it, because humor is a soft weapon, but lately she laughed less. Their marriage had become a place where words were careful and silences were loud. Percy didn't shout. He did something worse. He withheld warmth, like a man turning off the light and pretending the darkness is your fault. And still, Mara moved through her days with dignity, the way a queen walks through her own palace, even when the guard at the gate starts acting like he owns the crown. They had not always been this way. There was a time Percy looked at Mara as if her smile could fix traffic, cure headache, and maybe even teach Nipa to behave. Back then, he was attentive, eager, almost sweet enough to be suspicious. But comfort can turn some men into landlords of things they did not build. Over time, Percy's admiration shrank into entitlement, and entitlement turned into impatience. He started complaining about harmless things. How Mara read too much, how she worked too hard, how she acted like she didn't need anybody. It was funny, because Percy's pride wanted to be needed, but his habits made needing him feel like punishment. When Mara served him food, he ate like a judge and reviewed it like a critic. When she spoke about her goals, he nodded like a man listening to weather, present, but not invested. He began to treat her calmness as arrogance. He wanted tears he could feel powerful beside, apologies he could collect like trophies. Mara didn't give him that. She was soft-spoken. Yes, but she was not small. She kept her observations quietly, like money in a hidden pocket, safe, counted, and waiting for the day it would matter. That week, Mara's phone chimed with an email. A 2-week work trip, confirmed and urgent. Percy read the subject line over her shoulder and whistled like somebody had just announced free gifts. "Travel again?" he asked, stretching the word again until it looked guilty. Mara nodded, folding clothes with neat precision, as if order could shame chaos back into behaving. "It's important," she said. Percy smiled too quickly. He offered to help pack. He carried her suitcase like a gentleman, but his eyes were brighter than they should have been. He kissed her forehead, but it felt like a stamp, not affection, approval for her to be absent. Mara didn't catch the hunger hiding behind his kindness, because Percy had become an expert at pretending. He asked about her flight time, her hotel, her schedule, sounding like a caring husband while collecting details like a man planning mischief. And when Mara teased, "Try not to miss me too much," Percy laughed softly and replied, "I'll manage." The way he said it was almost comic, like he was preparing for a holiday, not a marriage. If Mara had been the type to read omens, she would have noticed the way the house seemed to hold its breath. The day Mara left, the sky was bright and shameless, the kind of morning that makes betrayal look clean. She wore a simple outfit, practical and elegant, the uniform of a woman who handled business and still remembered to moisturize. Percy insisted on walking her to the gate like a hero in a movie, except the hero's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Call me when you land," he said, voice sweet, shoulders relaxed, hands helpful. Mara studied him for half a second too long, not because she suspected cheating, but because she missed the version of Percy that used to feel like home. She kissed him lightly and entered the taxi. Percy waved until the car turned the corner. The moment it disappeared, his face changed, like a mask being set gently on a table. He didn't look sad. He looked relieved. He walked back inside and inhaled deeply, as if freedom had a scent. Then he picked up his phone and typed with the speed of a man who had rehearsed the message in his head. "Come over. She's gone." No poetry. No guilt. Just permission. Mara arrived at her hotel later that day, tired but steady. She unpacked with quiet routines, hanging clothes, placing her perfume on the dresser, aligning her chargers like soldiers. She called Percy. He answered quickly, almost too quickly, and asked about her flight like someone reading a script. "How's the room?" he asked. "Good," she said. "And you?" Percy chuckled. "I'm fine. The house is quiet." That should have been comforting, but something about his tone felt strange, like a man describing quiet as an opportunity, not a mood. Mara told herself she was overthinking. Work had a way of making small worries sound louder. She focused on her tasks, her meetings, her deadlines. Still, in the background of her mind, a soft alarm rang, faint but persistent. That night, as she fell asleep, she dreamed of doors closing and keys changing hands. She woke up and laughed at herself. "Stress is doing gymnastics in my head," she muttered, and went back to sleep, unaware that in her own bed at home, Percy would soon lay down beside a woman who wasn't her. Back in the house, Percy moved fast. He opened windows, sprayed air freshener, and played music too loud, too excited, like a teenage boy left alone for the weekend. When the mistress arrived, she stepped in with confidence that did not ask permission. She looked around slowly, eyes scanning the furniture, the decor, the clean lines Mara loved. "So this is her taste," the mistress said, wrinkling her nose like the house offended her. Percy laughed, eager to impress. "It's ours," he corrected, and she smiled as if he'd handed her a crown. She set her handbag on Mara's table without flinching. She kicked off her shoes like she belonged. Percy watched her with the pride of a man who thought he had upgraded his life, ignoring the fact that he had simply invited chaos into someone else's order. "Relax," he told her. "She won't be back soon." The mistress glanced at the family photos, then at Percy, and smirked. "Then let's enjoy ourselves," she said. And just like that, the house that had once been a sanctuary began to learn a new sound: disrespect wearing perfume. By the second night, the house had started to feel unfamiliar, even to itself. Percy woke up late, stretched like a king with no responsibilities, and walked barefoot across the living room, stepping over shoes that were not his wife's. The mistress lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, legs crossed confidently, as though she had paid rent with audacity. She commented on the decor freely now, calling the throw pillows too serious and the wall art trying too hard. Percy laughed along, encouraged by how easily she dismissed the things Mara had chosen with care. He enjoyed this version of himself, unquestioned, admired, unchecked. He told the mistress stories about his marriage, edited carefully to make himself look misunderstood and Mara look cold. "She's always busy," he said, shaking his head theatrically. "Work, work, work." The mistress nodded like a therapist who had already chosen a side. She suggested rearranging the dining table. Percy agreed. Together, they moved furniture slightly, not enough to be useful, but enough to be symbolic. Disrespect doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters quietly and shifts things just enough to announce dominance. That afternoon, Percy gave the mistress a tour she did not need. He opened cupboards like a host, not a guest, and boasted about the house as though his name was engraved on the walls. "This place cost a lot," he said casually, "but it's worth it." The mistress raised an eyebrow. "Must be nice," she replied, already picturing herself as the reward. She wandered into the bedroom and opened drawers without hesitation. Mara's clothes lay neatly folded, scents of her perfume clinging stubbornly to the air. The mistress lifted a silk scarf and laughed. "She dresses like someone afraid of pleasure," she said. Percy chuckled, though a small part of him felt something like guilt, brief, weak, easily ignored. Instead of stopping her, he leaned against the doorframe and watched as she tried on Mara's slippers. They fit. The mistress smiled wider. "See," she said, "it's like I was meant to be here." Percy didn't argue. He liked the sound of destiny when it excused his choices. That night, the spare room lost its purpose entirely. Percy followed the mistress into the master bedroom with a confidence that surprised even him. He justified it with ease. "It's just a bed." The mistress lay down first, stretching out as though claiming territory. She commented on how soft the sheets were, how expensive everything felt. Percy joined her, ignoring the framed photo on the nightstand. Him and Mara smiling from a time when smiles meant something. He turned it face down without thinking. Laughter filled the room, careless and loud. Outside, the house absorbed it silently, the way walls always do. Somewhere across the city, Mara slept peacefully, unaware that the space she had built with intention was being invaded with arrogance. Percy drifted off with satisfaction, believing he was winning something: love, freedom, excitement, never once considering that he was only borrowing comfort from a place that could legally wake up one morning and reject him. By the fourth day, the mistress no longer acted like a visitor. She acted like a replacement. She woke early, tied her hair into a scarf she found in Mara's drawer, and walked into the kitchen as if she had been cooking there for years. She criticized the arrangement of plates, complained about the lack of spices she preferred, and declared the coffee too mild. Percy watched her with a mixture of amusement and unease, but he said nothing. Silence had become his favorite way to avoid responsibility. When she suggested changing the curtains, he nodded. When she said the house needed more life, he agreed, even though life was exactly what Mara had given it. The mistress laughed loudly on phone calls, referring to Percy casually as "my man," and the house echoed the phrase back with disbelief. Percy liked the sound of it. Titles can intoxicate people who have done nothing to earn them. That afternoon, the mistress invited someone over briefly, just a friend, without asking Percy. He hesitated, then allowed it, enjoying the power of being the man in charge. The visitor complimented the house, and the mistress accepted the praise freely. "Thank you," she said, as if the compliment belonged to her. Percy felt a strange pride mixed with anxiety. He told himself he was overthinking again. After all, Mara was far away, busy, unreachable. He convinced himself that what she didn't see couldn't matter. That evening he sent her a short message. "Hope work is going well." It was a performance, and Percy played his role well. Mara replied politely, unaware that her absence had been interpreted as permission. Later that night, Percy and the mistress sat in the living room, feet on the table, television blaring. She teased him about his wife, calling Mara too serious and too controlled. Percy laughed weakly, defending Mara half-heartedly, not because he respected her, but because some part of him still remembered who she was to him once. The mistress waved it off. "Relax," she said. "Women like her always think they own things just because they paid for them." Percy laughed again, louder this time, letting the comment pass like a harmless joke. He didn't correct her. He didn't challenge the idea. He allowed the misunderstanding to grow roots. That night, as they went to bed, Percy felt oddly untouchable, like a man who believed the ground beneath him was solid simply because it hadn't cracked yet. He slept deeply, unaware that while his house was being disrespected physically, something far more dangerous was happening quietly elsewhere. The truth was being remembered by the person who owned everything. By the fifth day, the house had fully surrendered its manners. Shoes lay wherever confidence dropped them. Dishes stayed longer in a sink, as if waiting to see who truly ruled the space. The mistress moved with authority now, humming while she rearranged shelves and criticizing corners like an inspector who never built anything but enjoyed pointing. Percy watched it all with lazy approval, mistaking comfort for control. He had begun to speak differently, louder, more careless, like a man who believed absence erased accountability. He bragged freely about how long Mara would be gone, how busy she always was, how she trusted him too much. The mistress laughed at that one, shaking her head. "That's how women lose things," she said, not knowing she was standing inside a lesson. Percy grinned, enjoying the way she admired his supposed boldness. He ignored the faint voice in his head reminding him that trust was not weakness, and homes were not trophies. The house listened quietly, storing every insult like dust settling in corners. That evening, the mistress wandered into the bedroom alone. She stood in front of the mirror for a long moment, studying her reflection against Mara's space. She opened the wardrobe fully this time, pushing aside neatly arranged clothes without respect. She tried on a dress that wasn't hers, laughing at how well it fit, spinning slightly as if auditioning for permanence. When Percy walked in, she asked casually, "Why does she keep things so organized?" Percy shrugged. "That's just how she is." The mistress smirked. "Must be exhausting." She climbed onto the bed and patted the space beside her. Percy hesitated only briefly before joining her. The framed photo on the nightstand caught his eye again, him and Mara at a restaurant, smiling without effort. He turned it face down once more, this time deliberately. The mistress noticed and laughed softly. "Good," she said. "No distractions." They lay back against pillows that still smelled faintly of Mara's perfume, ignoring it, as people often ignore warnings they don't want to hear. Later that night, Percy lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. The mistress slept easily beside him, comfortable in borrowed space. For the first time since Mara left, something like unease crept into his chest, not guilt, but fear dressed as irritation. He told himself it was nothing, that he deserved happiness, excitement, attention. He reminded himself that Mara was far away, focused on work, probably not even thinking about him. He reached for his phone and typed a brief message to her, something safe, something ordinary, then deleted it. Instead, he sent nothing. Silence felt easier. As he drifted off, he imagined the future rearranging itself neatly around him, the way the mistress had rearranged the house. He didn't imagine consequences. He didn't imagine locks changing or doors closing. He didn't imagine waking up in a place that no longer recognized him. Percy slept deeply that night, wrapped in comfort he did not own, unaware that elsewhere, far from the disorder he had allowed, a woman named Mara was beginning to remember exactly who she was, and exactly what belonged to her. The house did not exist in isolation, no matter how much Percy behaved as if walls were loyal accomplices. Neighbors noticed things long before they understood them. A different laugh floated over the fence in the evenings, higher, sharper, careless. Curtains that were once drawn neatly now stayed open too long. Music played at odd hours, not loud enough to call the police, but loud enough to announce unfamiliar confidence. Mrs. Adeyemi next door paused more often at her window, folding and refolding the same clothes as she watched a woman she didn't recognize come and go with the authority of ownership. The woman waved once, smiling too freely, and said, "Good evening," like someone greeting a neighborhood she planned to conquer. Mrs. Adeyemi smiled back politely, the way elders do when confusion asks for patience. She told herself not to assume. Assumptions, after all, were younger people's sport. But patterns don't lie. The woman began receiving deliveries, packages signed for boldly, meals ordered without checking with anyone. She walked around barefoot, hair tied carelessly, posture relaxed. Percy followed behind her sometimes, keys in hand, nodding at passers-by like a man proud of a secret. One afternoon, Mrs. Adeyemi overheard the woman on a phone call say, "I'll be home soon," and something about the phrase struck her wrong. Home, she thought, was a word that carried history. She remembered Mara, quiet, respectful, always greeting properly, always fixing the gate when it squeaked. This new woman didn't fix things. She replaced them. And Percy, once polite to a fault, now barely acknowledged greetings, as though familiarity had upgraded him to arrogance. That evening, Mrs. Adeyemi made up her mind. She didn't confront Percy. She didn't gossip. She sent a voice note to Mara instead, measured, careful, heavy with concern. She chose her words slowly, the way you handle fragile things. She spoke of seeing another woman, of hearing her call the house hours, of feeling something was wrong. She apologized repeatedly for interfering. When she finished recording, she hesitated, then sent it. Across the city, in a quiet hotel room, Mara's phone lit up. She listened once, then again. She didn't cry. She didn't curse. She sat very still, as though her body was giving her mind space to work. When the message ended, Mara whispered, "Thank you," to a room that didn't know why. Somewhere far away, Percy laughed loudly at a joke he didn't deserve, unaware that the first stone had just shifted under his feet. Mara replayed the message again later, not because she doubted it, but because truth sometimes needs repetition before it settles. The words didn't sting the way she expected. There was no dramatic pain, no movie-style collapse. Instead, clarity arrived, clean and cold. She remembered Percy's eagerness when she packed, his cheerful acceptance of her absence, the way he'd said, "I'll manage." At the time, it sounded harmless. Now it sounded rehearsed. Mara stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at a city that didn't know it had just handed her a decision. The night air pressed against the glass. She felt calm. Dangerous calm. The kind that comes when emotion steps aside for memory. She returned to the bed and opened her laptop. Not to spy. Not to check messages. She opened a folder labeled Simply Property. Inside were scanned documents, contracts, receipts, things Percy never cared for, because paperwork bored him. She scrolled slowly, reading names, dates, signatures. Her name appeared where it mattered. Percy's did not. The house had been hers long before marriage, long before compromise, long before love tried to blur lines that law kept sharp. Mara exhaled a small sound, almost a laugh. So this was what Percy had mistaken for weakness. Her silence. He thought her gentleness meant surrender. He thought her calm meant ignorance. He had mistaken kindness for permission. She closed the folder and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For a brief moment, she considered calling Percy, asking questions, demanding explanations, allowing tears to do the talking. The thought passed quickly. Confrontation would give him time. Time would give him stories. Stories would give him excuses. Mara had no interest in any of that. She reached for her phone not to call her husband, but to search contacts she hadn't used in years, professionals, people who respected boundaries and contracts. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly, not in happiness, but in certainty. Somewhere, in a house he believed was safely under his control, Percy was settling deeper into comfort. And far away, without raising her voice or breaking a thing, Mara was preparing to remind him of a truth he had forgotten. Ownership doesn't announce itself. It simply acts. Morning arrived in Mara's hotel room, without ceremony. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, touching the desk, the chair, the quiet cup of coffee she hadn't finished the night before. She woke rested, which surprised her. Betrayal often steals sleep, but clarity had tucked her in gently. She showered, dressed, and moved through her routine with a steadiness that felt almost unfamiliar. While brushing her hair, she caught her reflection and paused. There was no devastation in her eyes, only focus. Mara smiled faintly, not because she was pleased, but because she understood something important. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. She sat at the desk, opened her laptop again, and reviewed the documents with fresh eyes. She didn't skim. She read every line, every clause, every date, savoring the precision. The house was hers, cleanly, legally, indisputably. It had always been that way. Marriage had never rewritten the truth. It had only made Percy forget it. She began to plan the way she did everything, quietly and thoroughly. She made a list, not of emotions, but of actions. Contacts first. She emailed a real estate professional she trusted, someone who valued efficiency over gossip. The message was brief and factual. I need to sell a property quickly. Cash buyer preferred. Discretion required. She didn't explain why. Explanations invited opinions, and Mara wasn't in the market for opinions. She followed up with a call to a legal contact, confirming details, timelines, possibilities. Her tone was calm, almost light. On the other end of the line, professionals responded in kind. Competence recognizes competence. Within hours, options began to appear, not dramatic, not rushed, but real. Mara accepted that satisfaction quietly, like a woman folding away a weapon she hoped she wouldn't need again. As the day unfolded, Mara attended meetings and smiled at colleagues who knew nothing about the storm rearranging her life. She took notes. She nodded. She spoke when required, and stayed silent when it served her better. In between sessions, she checked her phone once, saw a casual message from Percy, "Hope your meetings are going well," and let it sit unanswered. Not as punishment, as practice. She was practicing a new habit, acting without reacting. That evening, as she walked back to her hotel, she felt lighter. The future was no longer a fog of uncertainty. It was a series of steps, clearly marked. Percy believed time was on his side. Mara knew better. Time, like property, favored those who understood how to hold it. Back at the house, Percy had fully relaxed into a routine that required no caution. He woke late, ate lazily, and moved through the rooms like a man who assumed permanence was guaranteed. The mistress lounged comfortably, scrolling through listings on her phone, pointing out things she wanted changed. "This place would look better with lighter walls," she said, gesturing broadly. Percy nodded, half listening, already imagining a future that conveniently erased the woman who paid for it. He joked about renovations, about guests, about how people always envied what they didn't earn. The mistress laughed, enjoying the fantasy. Neither of them noticed how confidence had made them careless. Carelessness leaves fingerprints. That afternoon, Percy received a call he didn't expect. It was brief, professional, and unsettling in a way he couldn't quite place. He brushed it off, assuming it was spam or a mistake. When the mistress asked, he waved it away. "Nothing important," he said, with the casual certainty of someone who had never checked the ground beneath his feet. They spent the rest of the day drifting from room to room, turning lights on unnecessarily, leaving windows open, occupying space loudly. The house tolerated it the way it tolerated dust, patiently, temporarily. Outside, the neighborhood continued to observe. People noticed a new car parked too often. They noticed raised voices, careless laughter. They noticed Percy no longer greeted elders properly. Observations stacked quietly, like evidence waiting for a folder. That night, Percy lay in bed beside the mistress, scrolling through his phone, boredom creeping in where excitement once lived. He considered calling Mara, not out of guilt, but habit. He didn't. He told himself there was no need. Everything was fine. The house was warm, the bed comfortable, the future, he believed, secure. He closed his eyes with the satisfaction of a man who thought he had escaped consequence by outrunning honesty. Somewhere else, in a different city, Mara reviewed a message confirming interest from a buyer. She read it once, replied simply, and set her phone down. Two people slept that night with very different understandings of reality. One believed comfort was permanent. The other knew permanence was a matter of paperwork and timing. The next morning, Mara's phone vibrated before her alarm. She read the message without sitting up. Buyer confirmed. Cash. Flexible closing. It was the kind of sentence that carried weight without drama. She replied with a simple proceed, then placed the phone face down, as if to prevent the future from interrupting her morning. She dressed neatly, chose a calm shade of lipstick, and went about her day as if nothing remarkable was happening. Because for Mara, remarkable things happened when preparation met opportunity. Between meetings, she reviewed timelines. Digital signatures were ready. Legal confirmations were clean. There would be no delays disguised as concern. Everything was lawful, documented, and quiet. Quiet was important. Quiet denied Percy the performance he might later try to give. At lunch, Mara sat alone and watched people move around her with ordinary urgency. She felt oddly detached, like a woman watching rain from inside a sturdy building. She thought briefly about confronting Percy, imagined his confusion, his explanations, the way he might turn remorse into theater. The thought bored her. Confrontation would invite negotiation, and she had nothing to negotiate. She wasn't reclaiming love. She was reclaiming control. The house had never been about bricks and paint. It had been about respect. Percy had treated respect like a suggestion. Mara preferred rules. She signed a preliminary document electronically, her hand steady, her expression neutral. With that click, something shifted, subtle, irreversible. She finished her meal, tipped politely, and returned to work. That evening, she received a call from her legal contact confirming the next steps. Possession would be immediate. Notices would be served. There would be no ambiguity. Mara thanked them and ended the call. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, breathing evenly. For the first time since the voice note, she allowed herself a smile, not wide, Not cruel, just knowing. Percy believed silence meant ignorance. He believed absence meant surrender. He had underestimated how powerful quiet decisions could be. As night settled, Mara slept soundly, the kind of sleep that comes from certainty. Somewhere else, Percy poured a drink and laughed too loudly at nothing, unaware that the calendar had already turned against him. The house woke up to a different kind of order the next day, one it did not announce. There was no warning siren, no crack in the walls. Just paperwork moving faster than Percy's assumptions. While he and the mistress lingered over breakfast, a chain of actions unfolded beyond their awareness. Confirmation sent, transfers completed, instructions activated. Percy complained about the toaster taking too long and joked about needing a new one. The mistress rolled her eyes and suggested a shopping trip. They spoke of upgrades and plans with a casual confidence of people who thought tomorrow belonged to them by default. Midday brought a knock Percy didn't immediately answer. He assumed it was a delivery and waved it off. When the knock came again, firmer, patient, he frowned and went to the door. The exchange was brief and professional. Documents were presented. Names were confirmed. Percy's irritation flared, then dimmed into confusion. He signed nothing. He accepted nothing. He laughed once, thinking it was a mistake. The person at the door remained polite. Politeness, Percy would later realize, can be far more dangerous than anger. The door closed, leaving behind a thin layer of unease that settled into the house like dust. The mistress sensed the shift immediately. She asked questions Percy couldn't answer convincingly. He shrugged, dismissed it, suggested they step out for air. They returned later to a quiet that felt different, less welcoming, more observant. Percy tried to shake it off, turning up the television, opening windows, making noise. Noise did not help. That night, he lay awake longer than usual, scrolling through his phone, considering whether to call Mara. He didn't. Pride whispered that everything was fine. Experience told him to sleep. He chose pride. In another city, Mara reviewed a final confirmation and replied with one word: approved. Two lives continued on parallel tracks, one accelerating toward consequence, the other already beyond it. Percy's confidence grew fat on Mara's silence. He wore it like a new agbada, oversized, dramatic, and slightly ridiculous. That morning, he strolled around the house with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking louder than necessary, as if the walls needed to hear that he was a man of importance. The mistress sat at the dining table, legs crossed, sipping tea from Mara's cup as though porcelain automatically changed loyalty when lips touched it. She laughed at Percy's jokes, even the ones that weren't funny, because flattery is cheap rent and she was paying in bulk. Percy pointed at the living room and said, "We'll change this soon," like a politician promising roads he'll never build. The mistress nodded, eyes shining not with love, but with calculation. She wasn't admiring Percy. She was admiring what she thought Percy controlled. Later, she began acting bolder. She posted a harmless-looking photo of the house, interior to her status. Nothing that screamed mistress, but enough to whisper, "I'm living well." When Percy saw it, he chuckled. "Let them envy," he said. "People like talking." The mistress replied, "As long as you're the one they're talking about, it's fine." Percy liked that. He liked being the center of something, even if it was a lie. He'd always preferred applause to truth. He moved through the rooms like a landlord, opening doors, tapping walls, commenting on repairs as if the house owed him gratitude. The mistress followed behind him like a shadow that had learned to smile. That night, Percy sat on the balcony, looking down at the streetlights, telling the mistress stories of his sacrifices. He claimed he carried the marriage on his back, that Mara's work trips were proof she didn't value him, that he deserved happiness. The mistress nodded and said, "You're a good man," in the same tone people use when they want more gifts. Percy didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed and preferred it anyway. He raised his glass and said, "To new beginnings." The mistress clinked hers against his, smiling wide. Inside the house, the clock ticked on patiently, unimpressed by promises. Somewhere far away, Mara reviewed another confirmation message and didn't smile at all. She wasn't toasting. She was closing. The closing day arrived quietly. The way serious things often do, no trumpet, no crowd, just a door moving from one hand to another. Mara woke early, checked her email, and read through the final documents with the calm of a woman reading a recipe she'd cooked 100 times. Every signature was correct. Every clause sat in its place like well-trained soldiers. She signed what needed to be signed, confirmed what needed confirming, and kept her voice level during the brief call with her legal contact. The process was clean, fast, and lawful. There was no dramatic speech, no long prayer, no trembling hand. Mara didn't need courage. She needed accuracy. And accuracy? She had plenty. Back at the house, Percy had no idea it was no longer his stage. He spent the afternoon with the mistress, watching movies and laughing, occasionally pausing to complain about Mara's seriousness, as if seriousness was a crime and not a survival skill. The mistress said, "Imagine her face when she finds out you moved on." Percy laughed. "She won't do anything," he replied. "She talks big sometimes, but she's soft." The word soft landed between them like an insult disguised as a compliment. The mistress smiled because softness in another woman always sounds like weakness to someone who benefits from your pain. That evening, Percy fell asleep early. The mistress slept beside him, comfortable in stolen peace. In another city, Mara received the final confirmation that ownership had transferred and possession was scheduled. She read it once, typed a short response, and set her phone down. Then she washed her face slowly, as if rinsing away a version of herself that tolerated disrespect. She lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the silence speak. There were no tears, just a quiet certainty settling into her bones. While Percy slept under a roof he no longer owned, Mara slept under the weightless relief of a decision completed. It wasn't revenge for her. It was order being restored. Morning came with a knock that didn't match Percy's mood. He opened his eyes slowly, annoyed at the interruption, as if the world was rude for not asking permission before existing. The mistress, half awake, muttered something about people not respecting privacy. Percy dragged himself out of bed, grumbling, and shuffled to the door in slippers that suddenly felt too loud against the floor. The knocking came again, steady, firm, patient. Not the knock of a delivery rider. Not the knock of a neighbor borrowing sugar. This knock had paperwork in its pocket. Percy opened the door and was met with unfamiliar faces and professional expressions. People who didn't care about his charm, his pride, or his excuses. He tried to smile first. "Good morning," he said, leaning casually on the doorframe, the way men do when they think confidence can replace identification. A document was presented. Names were read out. The address was confirmed. The words sounded polite, but their meaning was sharp. Ownership had changed. Percy blinked hard, as if the letters would rearrange themselves into something friendlier. "This is a mistake," he said quickly, laughing once, an awkward laugh that cracked in the middle. The person speaking remained calm. Calm is terrifying when you're the one panicking. Percy's chest tightened. "Who sent you?" he snapped. "My wife." Even saying wife felt strange now, like calling a judge my friend. The mistress appeared behind him, wrapped in a robe that belonged to Mara. She took one look at the documents and stiffened. Embarrassment flashed across her face like a slap. She whispered, "Percy." "What is this?" Percy waved his hand, pretending control. "They're confused," he said, but his voice didn't convince even him. The people at the door spoke again, still calm, still firm, explaining next steps, timelines, possession. Percy's irritation turned into fear wearing anger's clothes. He raised his voice, then raised it more, insisting they leave, insisting they were trespassing, as if shouting could reverse contracts. The mistress stepped back, suddenly aware that confidence was easy when nobody challenged it. Percy shut the door hard, turned to her, and said, "Don't worry." But the house, now belonging to someone else, held their panic like a secret it couldn't keep for long. Percy didn't sleep well that night. He paced, checked his phone, looked out the window too often, and told himself the same lie repeatedly. This can't be real. The mistress tried to reassure him at first, saying things like, "Maybe it's a scam," but her voice was thin. She kept touching her hair, adjusting her robe, suddenly self-conscious about being seen in someone else's space. Percy called a friend for advice, but pride guided his words. He didn't say, "I've been exposed." He said, "There's a confusion about documents." He didn't want anyone to know he'd built a life on assumptions. Pride is a heavy suitcase, and Percy carried it even while drowning. The next morning, they came again, more organized, more official, less interested in Percy's feelings. Percy opened the door, already angry, like a man trying to scare reality back into its corner. "I told you people yesterday, leave," he shouted. The response was calm: names, dates, documents, authority. Percy stepped forward, blocking the entrance with his body, palms out, voice rising. The mistress stood behind him, eyes darting around like a thief hearing footsteps. She hissed, "Percy, please. Nobody should record. Oh, tell them." Her embarrassment turned into panic. She imagined phones raised, neighbors watching, screenshots living forever. Percy didn't care about recordings. He cared about pride. He argued loudly, insisting the house was his, insisting they had no right. But each word sounded weaker than the last, because paper doesn't tremble when you shout at it. As the tension grew, Percy tried to push the door closed again, but the moment was already beyond control. Voices gathered outside. People paused to watch. The mistress's face heated with shame. She pulled her robe tighter, avoiding eye contact with the world she had been bragging to. Percy's chest heaved. He threatened to call the police, forgetting that the law loves documents more than volume. One of the officials spoke firmly about consequences if he resisted. Percy scoffed, then faltered. The fear finally showed, just a crack, behind his anger. Inside him, something sank. This wasn't a discussion. It was a removal waiting to happen. And for the first time since Mara left, Percy felt the full weight of what he'd done. Not the cheating, not the disrespect, but the stupidity of challenging a woman who owned the ground he stood on. The standoff ended the moment authority stopped negotiating. Percy's raised voice lost its echo when firm hands guided him away from the doorway he was guarding like a lie. He struggled not with strength, but with pride, planting his feet, insisting, protesting, invoking ownership that no longer recognized him. It didn't matter. Calm instructions replaced arguments. The kind of calm that doesn't bend. The mistress froze where she stood, face hot with humiliation, eyes darting to the edges of the gathering crowd. "Please," she whispered sharply, "nobody should record. Please." She tugged at her robe, suddenly aware of how borrowed everything about her looked. Percy tried to pull free, but resistance only shortened the process. In one clean, efficient movement, he was lifted ungracefully, undignified, bundled and carried out like a sack of stubborn certainty, and set down beyond the threshold. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final. Not loud, decisive. The street seemed to exhale. Neighbors who had watched politely now looked away, the way people do when a lesson has already been delivered. Percy stood there, stunned, hands shaking, trying to piece dignity back together from fragments. Inside, the mistress hovered near the door, eyes wet, pride bruised. She didn't follow him out immediately. Shame is heavier when you know you chose the wrong side of a line. When she finally stepped out, it was with the hurried gait of someone fleeing a bad decision. The house, quiet, composed, held its ground without apology. Percy reached for his phone, as if it could pull the day backward. He dialed, swallowed, dialed again. When Mara answered, he spoke too fast, words tumbling over each other like panicked luggage. "Please," he said, voice cracked, "I have nowhere to go." The silence on the other end wasn't cruel. It was complete. Percy pleaded the way men do when pride finally loses its grip, earnest, frantic, promising reform in bulk. He apologized for things he hadn't understood before, naming them clumsily, as if recognition alone could reverse consequence. "I made a mistake," he said. "I can fix this." He explained the scene in fragments, skipping the parts that embarrassed him most. He didn't mention being carried out. He didn't mention the crowd. He asked for mercy like a temporary loan. "Just for now," he said. "Let me come back." Then he added the request that made the line go quiet again. "We he said careful, could stay. Me and her. Just for the meantime. He rushed to justify it, tripping over reasons. It won't be long. It's only until things calm down. Mara refused without raising her voice. She gave reasons that sounded almost polite and entirely absurd. The house was too quiet for lies. She developed an allergy to disrespect. The guest room had retired from hosting bad decisions. Her calendar no longer accepted chaos. She said it all calmly, as if reading office policy. Percy tried to interrupt. She didn't allow it. No, she said gently, and ended the call. The mistress watched him lower the phone, reading the answer on his face. What did she say? She asked, already knowing. Percy didn't respond. He sat on the curb, elbows on knees, staring at the ground as if it might open and hide him. The mistress checked her phone, then the street, then Percy. She shifted away, physically, emotionally. Opportunity has a way of leaving when risk arrives. By nightfall, the mistress had made her decision. She packed quickly, choosing items with resale value, avoiding eye contact. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by efficient retreat. I didn't sign up for this, she said, not unkindly, not apologetically. Percy nodded, too tired to argue. She left with a promise to check in, which sounded like goodbye. Percy watched her go, realizing that loyalty built on convenience collapses on contact with consequence. Alone, he scrolled through his contacts, skipping names that knew too much, stopping at none. The truth pressed in from all sides. He had nowhere respectable to sleep. The house was gone. The mistress was gone. The story he'd been telling himself had ended without a sequel. One option remained, the family house. It sat heavy in his mind, full of elders, questions, and memories that didn't allow selective honesty. He decided then it would be a secret. He would say little. He would explain less. He would shrink the truth until it fit his pride. Percy packed what he could carry and left the street quietly, avoiding familiar faces. The night didn't judge him, it simply let him pass. The family house smelled of old furniture and unasked questions. Percy arrived late, luggage small, excuses rehearsed. He greeted elders with forced steadiness, offered vague explanations about temporary arrangements and work complications. He avoided eyes that had watched him grow. Pride made him careful. Shame made him quiet. Nobody pressed immediately. Families sense cracks before they point them out. In the days that followed, Percy learned the weight of humility. He slept in a room that didn't flatter him. He answered to routines he didn't control. He listened more than he spoke. Every time his phone buzzed, he hoped it was Mara. It never was. He drafted messages he didn't send. He imagined apologies that arrived too late to matter. The house didn't mock him. It didn't comfort him either. Elsewhere, Mara returned from her trip and settled into a new space, lighter, intentional, uncluttered. She didn't announce her victory. She didn't need witnesses. Order had been restored, and peace followed like a consequence. Percy learned, slowly and painfully, that secrecy is not the same thing as dignity. In his family house, he moved carefully, speaking little, answering questions with half sentences and carefully edited truths. He said work was complicated. He said things were temporary. He avoided the word house entirely, as though saying it might summon ghosts. At night, he lay awake listening to familiar sounds, old floorboards, distant conversations, radios murmuring, sounds that reminded him he was no longer the man he had pretended to be. This house did not flatter him. It remembered him. It remembered the boy he used to be, before pride taught him shortcuts. Every morning, he woke with the same dull ache. Not hunger, not fear, but the quiet humiliation of knowing he had lost something he never truly respected. He checked his phone often, hoping for Mara's name to appear, rehearsing apologies that grew smaller each day. None came. Silence, he realized, was not cruelty. It was closure. Days passed, then weeks. Percy avoided familiar routes, familiar people, familiar questions. He kept the truth folded tightly, afraid that if it unfolded, it would tear what little composure he had left. The mistress never called again. Whatever confidence she once wore had evaporated with convenience. Percy did not curse her absence. He understood it. Relationships built on disrespect collapse under accountability. He replayed moments he once laughed through, the way he mocked ownership, the way he dismissed paperwork, the way he treated Mara's calm as weakness. He saw now how loudly arrogance announces itself when it thinks no one is listening. Every lesson arrived late, but none arrived gently. Pride, once his armor, became his punishment. Mara, meanwhile, did not rebuild loudly. She didn't need witnesses or validation. She settled into her new life with intention, choosing peace the way some people choose luxury. She worked, rested, laughed again, this time without caution. She did not carry bitterness forward. She carried clarity. The past stayed where it belonged. Percy's world shrank to the size of his regret, while hers expanded quietly, beautifully. And that was the final truth of it all. Betrayal does not always end with chaos or confrontation. Sometimes it ends with one person moving forward in peace and another standing still, finally understanding that ownership of homes, of love, of trust was never about occupying space, but about honoring it. Please like and subscribe. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for watching to the end. Don't forget to come back for the next amazing tale yet.